everyone. Happy Friday. Welcome to my show, May We Talk. This is May from Superstar TV 888. And today I have invited a special guest to join my show. And he's a filmmaker. He's been working on a film production for more than 30 years. Keith Colley, welcome.
I'm giving away my age. I started very young.
When did you actually start it?
Oh, well, actually, I did start very young. My father had a TV show that I got to be a guest on when I was 8 or 9 years old, and that was when I got my first taste. Of course, I didn't get makeup or I didn't get treated like a big movie star, but I got to see the action. My father it was a talk show, so it wasn't like entertainment. We didn't have dancing girls or elephants that could stand on one foot. It was a basic intellectual kind of thing that he had going on. But I did get to go on and do a little skit, but that was when I was very, very young. And then I was aware of the industry at an early age. I never really thought that it would end up consuming me. And I went to college and I ended up studying lots of different kinds of things because I was interested in everything. And I found myself working on films and making films. And it took me to Hollywood, where I started working on larger and larger films. And I was fortunate to work with some major filmmakers as an assistant to them, which gave me a basis of how the industry worked and what storytelling was about. And I think that was my most important takeaway from working so many years in Hollywood, and was to see, people call it a formula, but I don't think storytelling is so much of a formula. I think it is akin to how we are as people. Human beings have certain tendencies and ways that we do things. It's kind of like when you lose your keys, you find them in the last place you look. I mean, because you don't keep looking for your keys afterwards. It's the same thing with when you come across some kind of a question, or you pick something up, and go, well, what is this? So there's your first act, there's your setup, and then you go in and you start exploring it, and you start pushing buttons, and you go, oh, camera, takes pictures. And then there's your middle, your second act, and then your conclusion is, it's a camera. I don't need to look at this, or it's a phone. It's really a phone, but it's also a camera. So I don't need to look at it anymore. So we have a way of telling stories where we present an idea as a setup, as a question, as something that needs to be checked out. And then we come away with it with some gained knowledge at the end of it. The end result is we're changed. We become different because of the experience that we had. And that was one of the main things I took out of Hollywood, was this is a universal way of telling stories that works all over the world. And so I was then fortunate enough to get a chance to start working in China. And I think that China is where the new creativity is going to be taking place. Right. It has the largest audience, and right now the market is slumping. Everybody's saying film is dead in China right now, but they're so wrong. They're so wrong. Film is going to come back in a big way. Right. There will always be movie theaters. It's a rite of passage for kids who are in high school and want to go out on dates. They need someplace to go. I mean, you can go to the bowling alley, you can go to soccer games, you can go, but there needs to be a place for people to get together. And it's not hanging around the malls and just walking around malls. You really do need a place besides going out to dinner. After dinner, you go to a movie. And so families do it on holidays. It's just something that we will always do. And because it's enjoyable, because we get something out of it. If we see a good movie, we become fulfilled. We talk about it with our friends and our neighbors. It's just something that's going to be around forever. And I know it's not doing well, and that's because of the COVID, and it's also because the film industry in China is very young. There's been some dark times involved, and they've worked their way through those. Now the lights are on and things are shining and bright in China's future, and I think that Ang Lee kind of opened the door to Chinese movies in the early 2000s with Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. And then Zhang Yimou followed with his series of Flying Daggers and Hero, and he had some huge blockbusters, which established that Chinese movies could find a commercial success outside of China. And so I think that's when the film industry in China really got started. And so it's young. I mean, it's 20 years. And then what happened was after that got started, everybody jumped on the bandwagon. Anybody that all these rich coal miners and real estate moguls all wanted to be filmmakers and make films, and nobody bothered to try and learn how to do it. And I mean, the things that the Chinese stories that people were working with are kind of these allegories. These stories that take 5,000 years. I mean, a monk travels to India to get the scrolls, and that takes 1 billion years. And, he fights the spiders on the way, and then he fights the other monsters on the way, and then there's just shit that happens along the way. And so I think the films that started to come out of China were just pieces of these things. So we didn't really have that beginning, middle, and end, or that the issues that needed to be explored, that by the end of the movie offers the viewer some more insight into their lives, even if the story is about people in outer space. A good story is something that you can relate to, like when you were at the office, and the same issues, only set in an extraordinary circumstance. And that's the great thing about movies, is you can just take these ordinary things and then you can multiply them by 1 billion times. And now it's not like you can't find your keys and you're going to be late for work. Now, you can't find the oxygen containers and everybody on the space station is going to die. And so it's the same issues that you multiply. And then the extraordinary epiphysis of the main characters, that they come to learn something about themselves that gives them the strength to solve the issues, is something that the audience takes away. And so those are kind of missing in these little tidbits of, like, The Journey to the West, that would be a whole movie. And so basically those movies had a beginning, shit happened, and then they ended. And so they didn't travel well. Everybody was excited to see their childhood stories played out on the big screen. The young kids today in China are light years ahead of their parents as far as culture and worldliness and ideas. Once these kids get a little bit more power, and I think we've weeded out all of the people that made a ton of money in the early days of the capitalist explosion in China, who then thought they were super cool and wanted to be filmmakers. And I think we've weeded all of those out. Now there's a little bit of a lull. I mean, and COVID, my God, destroyed everything everywhere.
Right.
But we're
Or
starting to,
squeeze out the bubbles.
yeah, yeah. Well, anyway, we're starting to come out of that. So I think there's a bright future ahead for those filmmakers that are sticking with it, starving right now, but sticking with it. And there's no reason you can't tell a clean story. I mean, we have a million stories here in America that could pass censorship, and they're great stories. You know, to say that, oh, we're held back by censors from telling deep stories, that's a lot of baloney. You know your set of rules in China, you play within the rules, you put things together that fit within the rules, and you're going to be successful, because if you can tell a good story, people will come, and that will, you know, give way to people telling more stories and better stories.
Right.
So anyway, that's my rant.
Well, that's a very good comment. I know that you have a lot of experience working with China filmmakers, and you know the market, what the appetite from the Chinese audience. Because I grew up in China before, and I've watched the movie when I was really young. But I see the changes in the cinemas, the films, and the varieties and options are increasing when I grew up. And because a lot of kids, like you said, the young people, they had a chance to immigrate or stay overseas, so they watch an overseas movies. They appreciate they kind of improved appreciation ability of movies, so which requires the higher, you know, level or standards for the Chinese filmmakers. But most of the Chinese filmmakers, they only learn that from college and school. They don't really have much chance to practice, and they have the systematic way to be educated. So I think experience that you introducing the Hollywood film production skills, I think it's going to be very helpful for the Chinese filmmakers to improve. I think the film market in China is just so big that you cannot ignore, you know. And
No,
I think
going away.
right. I mean, it's like I said, you know, we need to make a quality movies. Also, a lot of movies can be made out of the China local culture. I mean, the movie language could be universal. You just need to know how to tell the story, right? And, you know, make the right way. I mean, no matter if it's the local story or from Hollywood story, it's always, it can be understood by the audience.
That's the main point, is that there has to be something in the movie that is actually mirroring people's lives, even if they have the dullest life, and they work at an iPhone factory making iPhones every day. There is still drama that takes place in these factories that can be blown up and, like I said before, transposed into Mars and space walks and things like that. That's the beauty of movies, is that we can take the audience to places where they just can't go. And that's what the big blockbusters are all about. But you don't have to be a big blockbuster to tell a good story. A good story is something that moves people and gives people some sort of insight into themselves and some strength to be able to better face tomorrow, I think.
Okay. Yeah, that's true. So can you tell me what is your favorite, the most favorite movies, and what do you like about it?
I like Groundhog Day with Murray, that movie, because it's about second chances.
Second chances.
I like to think that in a perfect world, we all have second chances. So anyway, I like that movie. Other movies I like, you know, I liked Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. And you know what I really liked? When I was in college, in the 80s, after school, after studies, we had this series called Kung Fu Theater. And it was all of the Hong Kong Kung Fu movies that had the translations and the English dialogue that didn't match the lips. And it was just the most ridiculous stuff on earth. But they were all about these lonely masters traveling through the countryside of life alone, and they would defend their master's reputation to the death. And they had integrity, and they helped the person from, you know, like the people that were stealing their land or killing their cattle. They would help the underdog, and then they would, at the end of the movie, move off onto another with just a stick with their little bag of food on the end of it. And yet they had the most amazing choreography of fights, and they were just so heroic.
Yeah,
That
I mean,
genre is
talking about the second chance, I mean, if you have a chance to choose again, will you choose to be a filmmaker, or you would choose to do something else?
I would choose to be a more successful, richer filmmaker.
Richard, you don't think you?
I would prefer to have my movies make a lot more money if I had it to do over again. No, I don't. You know, if I had it to do over again, I wouldn't have wasted so much time as a kid, thinking that I had forever to be able to do the things that I wanted to do. And I would have probably started in my late teens, and which, you know, I kind of did, but I never took it seriously enough. And it wasn't probably until I was out of school, out of college, and I stayed forever in college. I studied biochemistry. I got degrees in biology and chemistry, and then I was doing physiology studies, and then all the while I was doing studies in the fine arts, and I ended up getting a master's of fine arts in dance and filmmaking. And by that time, I'm in my 30s making independent movies of artsy kinds of things, thinking that I'm an artist, and then well, I'm sort of an artist.
You paint anything?
But I couldn't make any money.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, I was like one of these artists that unless I didn't have like a rich uncle, so I was one of these artists that all of a sudden when it came time to feed the family and pay the rent, it was like, okay, well, I know how to make films, so I'm going to start working on Hollywood films. And so then I got swept away. I think the first film I worked on was Oliver Stone's Natural Born Killers. And when I showed up on the back lot to report for duty, I was immediately paid like $500 per diem, cash. They just filled out cash. They go, here's spending money. And I went, oh my God, I've been a starving artist.
Probably more than you sell your painting. Huh?
Yeah, so right away I said, okay, I know where I can make some money. And so I just started working on bigger and bigger Hollywood projects, and I got to do what I wanted to do. I get to work with some of the greatest filmmakers. I mean, you can check out my IMDb. I worked on throughout the 90s and even into the 2000s before I came to China. I was working on, I think there was no movie I was working on that had a budget of less than 60 to 80 to $100 million.
What movie is that?
Well, first of all, Oliver Stone was the first project I started working on as a lighting technician, and for Bob was winning all these Academy Awards. And then I worked on a movie called Outbreak with Dustin Hoffman and Donald Sutherland, and then I did Clueless with Amy Heckerling, directed that with Clueless was a huge hit. After Clueless, I did Independence Day, which then was the largest box office success on earth at that particular time in I think it was 1995. Then right away, I did a series of projects with Roland Emmerich, who directed, him and Dean Devlin. Dean Devlin produced and co-wrote. Did a series of projects for both of those guys for the next several years, which were all huge movies. The Patriot. I think we did one small one called Spiders, Eight-Legged Freak. And then I worked with Michael Mann and Michael Bay. I went to Africa with Michael Bay and Will Smith, and Pearl Harbor was a huge one. We recreated the...
What part of a role you took in Pearl Harbor?
I was on the visual effects unit. And so we went to Pearl Harbor and blew up all the airplanes and we had airplanes flying, dropping bombs in the ocean, and we set fire to the inactive fleet. And we hired all of the best trick pilots from all the air shows and every country fair you've ever seen to fly these Zeros, these replica Zeros, and actually did all of the strafing at the actual location in Pearl Harbor. It was mind-boggling to be filming and have an airplane come within 10 feet of you traveling at like 200 miles an hour and about 10 feet off the ground. And when we were shooting, if you look down on the ground, it was the same cement. You could still see where all the bullets had chipped away in the cement. It was
from the movie, or is it?
No, from the real life.
Oh, the real life. Okay.
The actual Pearl Harbor attack.
Yeah, I was there a few months ago in
you were?
Yeah.
Did you go to
visit the Pearl Harbor Museum?
Did you see the Arizona ship? Still underwater. The USS
I didn't go underwater, but I visit the museum. Yeah,
you still see bubbles coming up from it. It's just it's an amazing monument to this incredible thing, and
it's a memorable history. You only learn from history, right? And that can take it as a lesson to to make the right decision for the future, and that's the way it goes.
Yeah, one would hope. It seems like we keep repeating things over and over again, but hopefully someday we'll learn, right? I don't want to talk politics right now, but I have high hopes for the Chinese people. I think that they have a lot of integrity in China, and they work together. There's respect. You know what I like about China? There's a certain amount of tolerance there that we don't have here. There is a certain amount of respect and tolerance that the people have for each other that I think we've lost here in the United States. I mean, so often, within seconds, you can have a fight here. And, I kind of don't feel, as safe here as I did walking around the streets of Beijing.
Right. I mean, because you've been living in China for a long time, you kind of get used to that culture there. We do have a wider tolerance than the Western countries.
It's a nice thing, it's a very nice thing. People talk about, but it's communism. I look at how life is for the average person. And here, not so good. There, not so bad. That's the extent of my political philosophy.
Right. So talk about your plan. What is your plan for the near future?
I'm looking forward to getting back to China because I think that's where the market is going up. In 2008, when I was here making a lot of independent movies, when the banks went bust, we kind of lost all of the money that had been from the hedge funds, from the boom years of the stock market. There was a lot of money to be spent on making independent movies in the United States, and there was a DVD market, so that if you didn't get a theatrical release, you could always get DVDs, and streaming was just getting ready to get started. So now there's a whole different distribution model here in America. There's a lot of streaming, but even that you have to have multiple episodes. The real creativity here in Hollywood now is on the streaming services. There's a lot of great stuff on Netflix and Amazon and HBO Max and Paramount and all those guys. Whereas the movie theater is not so much. So making movies here in America is not as an enjoyable thing anymore. I think making movies in China for Chinese people is where the real opportunity is to get something made, get it on the screens, and enjoy the benefits of doing good work, working hard, and telling a good story. I think that's not been overtaken by the studios yet. There are no studios really there. I mean, there's Wanda, but I don't think that anybody has a stranglehold on the distribution process in China right now. So I think it's a good opportunity for filmmakers who understand China. I mean, a lot of people want to get a chunk of the Chinese market, so especially Hollywood, the forcing of a co-production just to get distribution in China is not a health formula for making movies, and it hasn't been working well. So I think that the indie market in China right now is wide open. I mean, Jia Zhangke is the perfect example. If you can tell some good stories in China with a moderate budget, you can make a lot of money and you can have a lot of fun. And that's one of the things I've been fortunate about, is getting into working in movies has been something that I've enjoyed. I mean, when the lights go down and the curtain opens and the projection goes on the screen and you see your work up there.
Yeah.
And you walk and you listen to the audience, people laughing, or you see what they like and what they don't like. And sometimes it's a big disappointment, but other times it can be really great. And that's what really, for me, that's what living.
I know you have been teaching the young filmmakers to filmmaking lessons or classes. Are you still doing it?
I did a year ago. I did a master class online. I absolutely hated doing it online because it was a Zoom thing, and that all of the students turned off their pictures and they just had still images of their faces. And when I teach and lecture, I have to look at the people and I have to say things and I get feedback and it gives me energy to keep on talking. And as you can tell, I can spit out the words and just go off and talk and talk and talk and talk.
Yeah.
But if I'm talking to a blank screen, it just doesn't work for me.
It does feel odd.
And I have 100 little still images, and I had to beg people to turn on their cameras but yeah, I would still like to do that, and I haven't, but I'm waiting for this whole COVID thing to end, Right.
Superstar Art Foundation, nonprofit organization here. So we're trying to build a platform to help the young artists achieve their dreams. So we provide the training opportunities and some of the programs like a museum, online museum, and also pageant contest to help the young artists grow and give them some work opportunities. So maybe there's some project.
I'd be happy to teach again if you made everybody keep their cameras.
Right. I mean, yeah, that's exactly what we were trying to do, because we are going to promote some of the filmmaking classes, and I need to find a good coach. I think you are the perfect fit.
All right.
Hopefully I will see your work soon, and we'll be able to see you in a class.
It's always a pleasure to see you. Take care of yourself.
Nice talking to you. We'll see you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.